Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I'm your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie.
Good day.
Good day to you as well, sir. And good day to all of our beautiful, beautiful listeners. We have, hey, the UFC's back. We don't have to think about what to talk about. We've shut our brains off. And like a lot of the best fighters, Phil, I feel that's when we're at our best. We also come in today's episode having just aced all of our picks, really, from last week. Nailed it, you know? And I think we can say that was cold, clinical analysis. There was, it's a tough thing. Even when you've been in this game as long as you and I have, to separate yourself from the emotions of a fight prediction. But I think we did it. And, hey, the results speak for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, just having been in the game for this long, eventually you learn to divorce yourself from this kind of stuff. You just look at the maths of how things are going to turn out. And, we just saw the obvious route to victory for the incredible one-punch power of Bobby King Green. And, not many people can do that. But we obviously did, because we're that damn good.
Yeah.
And that's us being dispassionate. That's not bragging.
No. This is a dispassionate. We're simply stating the facts. But we are going to talk about Bobby Green, Grant Dawson, a little later in segment 2 of today's episode. And we will, of course, also get to some of the other fights we discussed. Drew Dober, Ricky Glenn, Bill Algeo, Alexander Hernandez, etc., etc. I actually found I have quite a few things to say about Alex Hernandez, who I thought looked pretty good. So we're going to get to that later. First up, though, we have another Fight Night card around the corner, and another pretty decent-looking one. This has, in the main event slot, Sadiq Youssef versus Edson Barboza, who at, 37, 38 now? Let's see.
He's getting too old for the big person divisions old, which is a bad old to be at featherweight.
He will be 38 in January.
Oh my God.
But he's still kicking around, and frankly, still pretty much just looks like Edson Barboza.
Mm-hmm.
He is a miracle man, as many truly plus athletes are. And no question, Edson Barboza is one of those kinds of special athletes. Anyway, he's taken on Sadiq Youssef. We have a couple other fights in this card, which we will also be getting to later in today's episode. The one most interesting to me, by far, is a bantamweight booking between Jonathan Martinez and Adrian Yanez, which just looks like a fringe contender versus fringe contender firefight. That I think will have big implications for both fighters and will undoubtedly be very, very fun to watch. And I'm really curious to see how different Yanez may or may not look after that shocking KO loss to Rob Font. So we'll be getting to that and maybe a couple others later on. But first up, Sadiq Edson Barboza is the order of the day. Should the rest?
Yeah, this is one where
should all of our analysis really just be thoughtful, non-verbalizations?
Make a good point.
Indeed.
Yeah, this is one where I feel like you sort of the idea of how declined Edson Barboza is really has to be like front and center.
Sure.
And for the moment, I think the answer is probably not very.
Mm-hmm.
I think the main thing is, I do think that Edson takes a punch worse than he used to. And I don't know whether that's because he's older or whether it's because he's cutting more weight.
Yeah.
Probably a combination of the two. But I feel like he certainly gets hurt worse than he used to.
Yeah. He has always been quite durable. I mean, there was that fight with Jamie Varner back in
he's never been like a super
unhurtable,
like, rock solid, durable fighter. Like he's gotten hurt badly by like Danny Castillo. Donald Cerrone knocked him down with a jab.
Yeah.
He's never been like super durable. He's very like mentally tough.
Oh, no doubt.
In terms of taking a punch, they've been great. And I do feel like that has gotten slightly worse, even as he's become, as we've sort of talked about, a bigger puncher down at featherweight.
Yeah.
I think that, to me, is the major worry here, because I feel like Giga Chikadze was the example of like a fight where I really feel like Giga Chikadze was doing that well, but then he just hit Barboza once and it was over. And like Barboza was just stumbling around the cage and Giga chased him down, but mostly he was just being not that good and Giga Chikadze up until that point. But yeah, I mean, you had some interesting things to say about Steve Yusuf before the show. So yeah, what do you think about him as a kind of matchup for Barboza?
Well, first of all, I think I totally agree that the question of this fight comes down to how declined Barboza should be front and center. And we should be aware of the fact that he is nearly 38 years old, while also acknowledging that aside from, I mean, maybe some, Giga Chikadze is a hell of a hitter. Like, I don't know that Barboza looks like he's much more fragile than he was.
It was like he was getting badly hurt by like Bryce Mitchell.
True.
And he just gets he's always someone who's gotten hurt a bunch. It's just like it's happening all the time in recent fights. Is my main worry. And he's 38. Like then again, at some point, age has to catch up with him.
Then again, didn't happen at all against Quarantillo. Obviously, Quarantillo's best round is never the first one, and there wasn't enough time. Didn't happen against Shane Burgos. If there's like a market speed advantage for Barboza, for sure. And I think perhaps part of it is simply it's connected to the reason that Barboza looks like more of a puncher at featherweight, which is that I think just being bigger relative to his opponents, he's more comfortable keeping his feet planted and staying in the pocket with people. I think he's always been a pretty meaningful puncher. But he's just a little harder to bully unless you have the Bryce Mitchell approach, which is really just a copy of the Kevin Lee, Khabib Nurmagomedov approach. But to me, the other defining aspect of this fight, which is very interesting to think about, is that this is a fight that I think will be decided by who does a better job of masking essentially the same critical flaw, which is that neither of these fighters know how to punch and move their feet at the same time. And these are generally seen in two very different sort of directional contexts. That Barboza, as we know, this is well documented by us and many others at this point, the Barboza gallop is essentially a meme. That if you can pressure Barboza hard enough, you are going to get him to start like dancing away in a way that does not connect him to any kind of return offense. And this sort of relates to like what we were talking about with Israel Adesanya. It's the same kind of problem, that there is a way to move away in which you maintain the sort of the threat and the presence of your own offense. And that way is called pivoting. We were talking about this forever with Jose Aldo. We praised Sean O'Malley for being good at it quite recently. You have to pivot. You have to keep your lead hand trained on the center line of the opponent. Every evasive move should in itself be a threatening move. And Barboza does not have this. Rather, he doesn't have it all the time. Barboza can pivot jab, but when he feels the pressure coming on and when somebody is just really insistent on coming forward, he squares up, opens his stance, and starts sidestepping. And these are big loping sidesteps, which, are quite effective at getting him back to open space except that there is a threshold where a certain amount of pressure and quality cage cutting will just keep him in this sort of cycle where he is up on the balls of his feet and he is not in a position, he's not lined up to fire back, and can't find the right timing to replant his feet, which is, of course, what he needs to do to fire back effectively. This is the soul of the problem. And Yusuf is not a galloper at all. He is a plodding fighter. But his problem is more or less the same, which is that he, you see, like, Yusuf likes to pressure. So I think the directionality of this fight will be pretty clear. But very quickly into most of Sadiq Yusuf's fights, the process becomes very repetitive very quickly, which is that he tends to sort of just inch forward. He does not feint a lot. He does have a jab, but he tends to just kind of inch into range until he gets to a point where, with his feet planted, he can fire off some hard shots. And I think part of this is that Yusuf does not appear to be a fighter who's very comfortable throwing away a punch or landing a shot just to touch somebody or just to measure them, just to draw a reaction out. So even when he's jabbing, these tend to come with committed steps, or they come from a rooted position, which means that the weapon, which should be his first line of offense and defense, which should be the key that unlocks all manner of combinations and all manner of adjustments that can be made once you are either in or right on the edge of range, all these options are not really that available to Yusuf, because every shot he throws is thrown in the same way, with a kind of planted feet. This is intended to hurt you. Same power, same intensity, same kind of tempo to everything. So what I see this as is a matchup where it's like, the question is, who's going to do a better job of planting their feet and touching the other guy first?
And the answer kind of has to be Barboza, right?
That is the feeling that I pretty quickly came to once this thought occurred to me. Yeah, is that
because
go on.
Yeah, in a neutral exchange where, like, both guys are broadly conceding to the same slice of space, like someone isn't just barging into that space over and over again, in which case, Barboza has to gallop away. But if the other person's main approach is like, all I want to do is to be standing at this distance with you, and having a stand-up kickboxing affair, like, Barboza is genuinely very good there.
Yeah,
he's.
I think the word you used
his
before...
defense is better, as you said. He can pivot.
Yeah.
He has an active lead hand in all the ways that you would want an active lead hand to be. Like, he can jab, he can double jab, he can hook off the jab, he body punches, and obviously he can end combinations with low kicks, or simply like chew people up from range with them anyway.
With any kicks too. His body kicks are savage as well, as are his head kicks. He's I think was he the first fighter in UFC history to have knocked out 3 people with head kicks? I think he was.
I think he was the first to finish people with low kicks, body kicks, and head kicks.
That's right. That's the stat. Yeah. But he's got knockouts of every variety coming from every weapon available, basically. I don't think he has an elbow KO yet. But he's got wheel kicks, he's got knees, he's got low kicks, he's got body kicks. He's cleaned people's clocks with hard punches like he did to Shane Burgos. I think the word you used when we were talking about this before hitting record was buzzsaw. And yeah, if you get into a Dan Hooker style fight with Barboza, he is a buzzsaw. You do not want to be in that range with him for long, unless you're pushing him back and making him, basically neutralizing his offensive output with pressure.
Yeah, I think the big example of a fight like this was also like Anthony Pettis.
Yeah, one of my favorite fights to rewatch, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because that was a big sort of feeling that, Barboza he's frail. As I said, he got hurt a ton. he's less powerful. He didn't finish people as much as Anthony Pettis did. He's certainly not nearly as durable as Pettis was. He didn't have the ground game of Pettis. Like, how would this fight go? And as soon as the fight goes, you're just like, right, he's just much better, isn't he? He's just better. He's just a more skilled fighter.
Yeah.
They both have this same flaw in that, they both really have the same thing in that they were, they would want a slice of range so strongly that they would literally run away to try and get it again, and so you could just keep them moving backwards forever. But in a fight where both of them conceded to that slice of range because they were like, "This is where I'm good," you were like, "Man, Barboza's much better than Anthony Pettis here."
Just jabbed his face off, hit him with every type of left hook in the world, shot inside of Pettis's backhand straight punches with like short inside angle left hooks. I remember very distinctly. Beautiful boxing performance from Barboza, because Anthony didn't make him gallop. And Barboza, feet planted in mutual range, is a beast. There is no question about that.
Yep. So basically coming back to the beginning, my main thing is that I do think that Yusuf kind of starts off pressuring, but then it does slip away over time, at least partially, I think, because he becomes less, it just becomes more obvious what he's doing, and so he becomes less confident in it. Like that certainly happened in the Feely fight. So there's going to be like long stretches of Yusuf just kind of waiting to see what Barboza is going to do and trying to counter him. This has always been a terrible idea because Barboza hits to so many different levels. He hits incredibly quickly. But then again, it comes when I think about it, I'm like, Barboza has, historically never been super invulnerable to people who've just jumped off the cage at him trying to hit him with one counter punch. But, that was sort of how as I said, how the fight with the evil Giga Chikadze was going. And is that Chikadze was up against the fence, and then Chikadze jumped off it and like beamed Barboza with one strike, and then the fight was over. So essentially, I just found myself thinking, unless Sadiq Yusuf lands the counter right hand of his life, and it decks a slightly faded Barboza in the way that like Giga Chikadze did, it's very hard to see him like winning the fight. It could be one of those kind of slightly Korean Zombie versus Brian Ortega fights where Ortega hurt him early and then Korean Zombie just never recovered and was obviously essentially sleepwalking through the rest of the fight.
Sure.
But other than that, I find it hard to see like a way in which Yusuf matches up the Barboza that allows him to win.
Yeah. One thing I'll say is that undeniably Yusuf's worst performances, and this includes the third round against Feely, have been against southpaws. That is when his worst traits are really magnified. His love of the counter right hand, the fact that he tends to come in really, really square. The thing with Yusuf, it just took me a long time to wrap my head around, because I think he was a much more subtle, creative striker before. I'm sure when he had his fight with who is it? Mike. Is Mike the right name? Davis?
Yeah.
Is that the guy's name?
The incredibly huge guy, yes.
Yeah, that he had on the Contender Series or something. Mike Davis. In like the first season, I think, of the Contender Series. I'm quite sure he was in there doing like shoulder rolls and shit. He was out there like boxing, and I think he did deal with some leg kicks as a result of this. But basically, almost since then, since he's been in the UFC proper, he has been a very squared up kind of fighter. He seems to have. It's like when King Mo went from training with the Mayweathers to training with what's his name? not Roger. It's the weird one, the one who doesn't fight like a Mayweather, and doesn't produce fighters who fight like Mayweathers, and puts himself in these positions where like he needs to be really accurate with his slips. He needs to be really accurate catching shots with his hands because he's squared up and head forward. And so almost as soon as Yusuf comes into range, his head is in range. I mean, not almost as soon, just as soon. His head is typically right over his front foot. This is a problem. And people can just get off on him first, as he's trying to get himself into range.
See also Shane Burgos.
Shane Burgos, absolutely a great comparison if you're wanting Barboza to win. Barboza is not a southpaw. Yusuf's jab will be there for him. It will occur to him as a shot he can land. That should make some difference because not only did his pressure go away as he continued to get tagged and as Feely adjusted, but one of the adjustments Feely made, which allowed him to pretty cleanly win the third round of their fight, was that he switched southpaw. And that really, really neutralizes. And of course, Arnold Allen, beat Yusuf. He's a southpaw. Alex Caceres gave him a surprising amount of difficulty before Yusuf figured out he could just low kick him as soon as Caceres did anything, made any move forward. He would just kick him in the leg and could trade power for power and come out on top. But he's just quite hittable and has a pretty cumbersome process of getting into range, even when his jab is available. Because as I said, it doesn't really work in the wedge-like way that it should. The other thing is that, I think Barboza is better defensively in the pocket, but I think he has had a lot more time to develop a feel for where his spots are. So even in fights where he is being pressured hard, because I think the winning strategy is right there for Yusuf. Everybody knows what to do. You have to pressure the hell out of Barboza. You have to stay in his face. You have to keep him moving back and just cut off the cage all night long. And I would expect Yusuf to come in looking to do that. But when that works as like an overall strategy to actually beat Barboza, the end point is wrestling. Because you have to pressure him super, super hard to stop him from planting his feet, which means you're going to run him into the cage. And if you run him into the cage and you do not have an option to continue closing the distance and tie him up, and then you can effectively out-wrestle him. Because let's not forget, Barboza is a great defensive wrestler. It's just that you can't be putting yourself into positions where you have to continually rely on your wrestling defense when you're fighting the likes of Bryce Mitchell or Khabib or Kevin Lee. Unless you have that as like the final stage of your pressure, then you'd better be Justin Gaethje. Because otherwise, you're Billy Quarantillo or you're Beneil Dariush. You're back into a position where, okay, he stopped moving backwards. He knows he can't move backwards. Now he's a buzzsaw again because his feet have stopped moving. And in addition to that, Barboza, he is not completely clueless when it comes to like finding little moments to get a stick in, to sting you with a jab and use that to facilitate a little more, to create a little more space that he can sneak out to the side. And as the fight goes on, the slower your sort of assaults get, the more hesitant your pressure gets, the more you start looking like, as you said, Shane Burgos. And if you're Shane Burgos, then Barboza, it's just full buzzsaw mode. He will just tune you up. So maybe this is a fight where Yusuf really knows what he needs to do, and maybe this is one where he really tries to lean on his wrestling. He does have a wrestling game. He's a great grappler. But it is not the Yusuf A game. And I think it has to be an A game, at least as far as the evidence has shown. Your A game has to be as a wrestler to definitively beat Barboza. And it is a very tiring, long, and drawn-out process to beat him with your wrestling combined with the pressure. And I just don't really trust Yusuf to be able to do that solidly for 5 rounds. You know? It's a 5-round fight.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna take Barboza. He may be middle aged, but he doesn't look very old, and I just think he's gonna get a lot better chances to meet Yusuf first when both men have their feet planted. And I've never really seen Yusuf pressure so consistently that I think he's going to keep Barboza out of punching position consistently enough to not get just lit up by him.
Yep. Yeah, I kind of have to pick him too. Admittedly, like, he is... it is one of those things where, like, his longevity is simply magical. Like,
yeah.
I've said this before, but, like, he's still fast and strong and has like shockingly good cardio despite doing insane things. I mean, his durability has historically been his only knock. But it's just the fact that, like, even, people could be like, well, maybe it's just steroids and this kind of stuff. But, like, it's the fact that he's just had a kicking heavy game for his entire career. And it's never like, you see, like, well, Thais, for example, famously like have incredibly short careers, but like also just like guys like Anthony Pettis. After a while, Anthony Pettis was just like, I'm not going to kick people that much anymore because I can't.
Yeah,
like
Barboza's knees still work. His feet are both attached. There's no evidence of bubble gum or duct tape. He's just in all the ways except chin, remarkably durable. As somebody who I get the impression is just constantly in training. Like, I think this is the other thing with Barboza that probably adds to his longevity, aside from the fact that he is obviously like a truly elite athlete. He is up there in that like Yoel Romero tier of like, this dude would probably be amazing at any sport he applied himself to. And in this case, the thing with Barboza is he still very clearly loves fighting. Like, he's really passionate about it. And you can see it every time he fights, every time he wins, like he gets very excited, like he loves it. And he talks about it, how much he loves it, that it is just it's his life's work. It's his passion. I think that's probably an explanation of longevity too, which speaks to the mental character of Edson Barboza, because he has been through some of the most brutal losses we have ever seen in the octagon. And some of those were years and years and years ago. They have done nothing to dim his fire for fighting. So he's going to come in energized, come in with that, what remains, which looks like most of his elite athletic ability. And I think as long as he has the desire to keep doing it, he's probably going to continue to be a very good fighter.
Yeah. I think mainly the thing that I worry about is that at some point, if the dials on everything get turned down as he gets older, he's going to get horribly knocked out all the time, because his speed will go from like a 10 to an 8, and his cardio will go from a 10 to an 8, and so on, and his durability will go from like a 6 to a 4, or a 6 to a 3, or something like that. So I worry that we get like a lot of Barboza looking like Barboza, and but then also
just
like
getting slapped
up. Yeah, backed up by just getting dusted every now and again. Things like the Giga Chikadze fight. I wonder whether that's what Barboza exiting his prime like really looks like.
Probably. It isn't. He can't not ever decline. He's a human being.
Yeah.
So it's
that is what concerns me, because I love Edson Barboza.
Who doesn't?
I like Yusuf as well. Like, he's incredibly charming. I wish he wasn't
a loitering guy.
Fighter.
I know, right? Since he started posting his fight breakdowns, like, he's really funny. He's
genuinely hilarious.
He is a very likable and charming individual, as you said. It's a shame about the whole cult leader rapist coach thing. But hey,
it really is. But yeah. Also picking Barboza, just like, because I'm just like, yeah, he should win it, but also I'm starting to think maybe the end of Barboza is just him looking exactly like Edson Barboza, but just getting wiped out more and more.
Yep, but hey, until I see it, it's one of those. Because, like I said, there's a lot of fights before this where you could be like, oh, this is probably the end of Edson Barboza. Nope.
Yeah, I mean, we were like, we got to pick him against Quarantillo. And we did.
And we did. And we were right, as we always are.
Yep.
All right. Well, speaking of us being perpetually correct, let's take a break. When we come back, Bobby Green versus some guy after this. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. All right, welcome back to the show. Bobby Green, Grant Dawson. We got him, Phil. We got him.
Oh, yeah. Oh. Or a doubt in my mind.
Your pleasure was so profound that you turned into a very pleased robot for a second there, but I think you're back.
Excellent.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, it was probably just it shorting out my mic. It's the sheer electrochemical joy of it all.
Yeah, it was your erection smashing against the bottom of your desk and disrupting some of the connections there.
Well, you know, that being said, I will say, Grant Dawson is definitely one of those ones where, like, it felt just like his continued success was just like a building up of pressure.
Yeah.
That he was, it wasn't so much that he's a bad guy. He's clearly not, you know, he was very, like, what's the right word?
Was he
you know,
gracious?
After the fight, he was talking to Bobby Green, who clearly, you know, didn't go insane after the fight was over or anything like that. He like understood that Bobby Green is like a cool guy, and
he was gracious.
His favorite fight is apparently Mendez Aldo 2.
Really?
Like, apparently, yes.
Wow. How do you explain his fighting style?
Right. Maybe that's just all he's good at. Like
sometimes your influences just do not show up in your work. That's like when you find out that Paul Thomas Anderson loves Adam Sandler movies.
Ooh.
Have you ever seen Punch Drunk Love?
Did he make that before or after Mortal Kombat?
You're thinking of it different. You're thinking of the other Paul Anderson, Paul W.S. Anderson.
Is Punch Drunk Love as good as Resident Evil?
Come on, you piece of... You're lucky Zane isn't here. Zane would be very...
I like the laser scene that they stole from Cube. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I like, I don't know. I don't remember any other movies that guy has done.
Event Horizon.
Okay, great. Oh, did he do that one?
I think so.
That's one that I think you and Zane agree on, which I think is stupid. You guys like it.
No, only I like it. Zane doesn't like it. Zane likes, what's the other one?
Polish
the other
films.
One that's just like it, but one that's set in the generation ship, and then the guy wakes up. That one.
Ad Astra? Did he do that? That's not him.
No, he likes the. Never mind. We're getting very sidetracked there.
Anyway, the anecdote I wanted to share is that Paul Thomas Anderson, who directed There Will Be Blood and many other good movies, Inherent Vice, The Master, he did Punch Drunk Love, which is an Adam Sandler movie, which is very weird and very tense and kind of charming, but also very discomforting. And it came out in interviews that he loves like Happy Gilmore and The Waterboy and 50 First Dates. And he saw Adam Sandler and he was like, I'm going to make an Adam Sandler movie. And that's what came out, is this weird, uncomfortable, anxiety-ridden, rom-com that is, weird. And
yeah, because presumably, like, Adam Sandler is sat there being like,
yeah,
finally, I'm going to be like a real actor. I'm in a real director's film, and then, Paul Thomas Anderson is like,
do that funny stuff you do.
Yeah, do the funny stuff. Do the funny stuff, funny guy. Very good.
Anyway, that's Grant Dawson emulating Aldo Mendez, whoever it is he idolizes in that matchup. The end result is not that kind of fight. But the point is that this is sort of this was essentially a penance for beating both Leonardo Santos, which made sense just because Leonardo's so old and his fights have such a predictable pattern to them because of his age. And for beating Damir Ismagulov, which still feels utterly inexplicable. This was essentially a penance, and Grant Dawson, you are forgiven, my son, because this is how these fights were supposed to go all along. And it was really an uncomfortable experience to go into this being like, not feeling like picking Bobby Green was the obvious choice. Because picking Damir Ismagulov was the obvious choice, and somehow Grant Dawson beat him. And if that fight had never happened, I would A, pick Damir to beat Grant Dawson in a heartbeat, and B, I would have picked Bobby Green to beat Grant Dawson with zero reservations or doubts. And so this really just feels like a return to normal, and for that reason, our vendetta against Grant Dawson is lifted almost as soon as it began. The jihad is over.
Yep. I mean, yeah, it was one of the rare examples where we were united in our common hatred of a single fighter. And I think that flame was too hot to burn, for long.
Yeah.
Particularly because, Grant Dawson isn't that good.
It's not worth that much ire, he still sucks to watch. I'm not going to be a fan.
Well, I mean, also because he was going to lose at some point, and then it was just going to be like, okay, fine, it's over now. Because it's not his fault that he sucks. He's not a bad guy.
No,
it's not his fault that he has an ugly fighting style. He's trying his best.
Sure.
And I think I heard was it Zane compared him to Darren Elkins? He's a lot like Darren Elkins.
Mm-hmm.
It's just maybe Darren Elkins would have. I mean, the main reason people love Darren Elkins is because he gets the absolute shit kicked out of him.
Yeah.
And sometimes comes back.
Yep.
Sometimes used to come back, let's say.
Now just refuses to die most of the time, but still gets slaughtered every minute of every fight.
Yeah, I mean, if Darren Elkins was out there, clunking his way through, the coolest fighters in the featherweight division, and he was just winning every fight.
Yeah,
I probably would have gotten really annoyed at Darren Elkins too.
It's like if Darren Elkins had a breakout win over a just recently faded Jose Aldo. No, this can't happen. This isn't supposed to. It makes you shiver.
You're making me hate Darren Elkins. It didn't even happen.
Wow. I'll comfort you by saying that even now, Jose Aldo would beat Darren Elkins. That's too.
He would, yes.
Far too high.
Get off the couch and beat Darren Elkins.
Far too high a bar to clear. But yeah, I mean, what happened here was again, it just felt like something that very likely could have and probably should have happened. It just furthers my impression that something else is going on with Damir Ismagulov. That sort of explains that performance, that he tried to retire, whether it was because he didn't want to fight in the UFC anymore or didn't want to fight at all anymore. He came back to fight Grant Dawson after attempting to retire from MMA. He said some worrying things about long-term damage or career-ending injuries that were pretty vague but no less concerning. But what happened here is something that could have happened in that fight or, very nearly did happen in the Santos fight before Santos just completely gassed, which is Grant Dawson is not a particularly natural takedown artist. He is a great positional grappler and a great scrambler, and he's big and strong, but he's not a particularly shockingly good wrestler in the context of takedowns. And he is, frankly, really bad at striking. He is extremely hittable. The knockout punch that landed in this fight, Grant Dawson literally doesn't even... Usually in a replay, you'll see somebody start to flinch even when they're getting knocked out. They see it a millisecond too late, but they do see it. Grant Dawson did not know he was being hit when Bobby Green hit him. He had no idea it completely shocked him, which is why it had the effect it did, which is also why Mark O. Madsen was able to knock him down very quickly into their fight, despite being a thoroughly mediocre boxer. I mean, he's fine, but, he's not Bobby Green, and he still sat Grant Dawson down in like 15 seconds. This was just Bobby Green being a very comfortable, very relaxed striker who sort of at this point, I think, just intrinsically knows what his range is without even having to establish it or feel it out. And he just lined Grant Dawson up and just punched straight through his face with a southpaw lead left hand. And that's it.
Yep.
So.
Yep. I hope Bobby gets a cool fight next.
Yeah.
More cool fights for Bobby.
Who did he call out again? He called out, he wants to fight Dan Hooker.
Sure.
Sounds great.
I'm down for that.
Dan Hooker, at least on Twitter, I believe, agreed. So as long as they can come to an agreement in the contract stage, it looks like that's probably what they're going to try to do with Bobby Green next. I'd be very happy to see that fight. It sounds perfect for both of them.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So other stuff on this card. Our sympathy for Alex Morono didn't pan out, but I actually want to talk first about the main card opener, which I thought was a really interesting fight. Bill Algeo and Alex Hernandez. Back up at lightweight, we pretty much pitched this as, hey, remember that fight with Billy Quarantillo? And, I thought this was a pretty good showing from Alexander Hernandez. He pretty clearly lost it, no question, but the margins were quite thin. And like if one thing hadn't gone wrong, who knows? I actually thought Hernandez, this looked like quite a mature performance from him. And apparently before this fight, he was speaking quite openly about his, anxiety around fighting, all this pressure that he feels. This looked like somebody who had, he's 31 years old. He's been through a lot of ups and downs, but this kind of looked like somebody perhaps hitting their peak. As we said with Edson Barboza, Hernandez is another guy who is clearly a top shelf athlete. And this looked to me like he had a lot of the mental hangups, if not solved, then at least had confronted them and kind of come to terms with them, and was really committed to a really smart, mature approach throughout this fight.
Yeah, I think this was him finally bridging the gap between his heavy bag striking performances.
Yeah.
Where he's just beating up on some, woeful athlete who just can't do anything to him because Hernandez is twice as fast and twice as strong as him.
Right.
And where he looks like a good striker and it's completely pointless because he could be doing anything. And his performances where he's just kind of galloping around and throwing big punches and scuttling backwards and getting fucked up with any pushback.
Yeah. Getting pressured and then immediately collapsing under the force of that pressure is usually the turning point in a Hernandez loss.
But yeah, this was him, often covering his retreats.
Mm-hmm.
This was him with good shot selection. The shot selection that he's used in his his heavy bag performances was now being used to close distance. I liked the jumping in shots to the I liked him coming in behind the body jab or the body straight.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes combining the two, just throwing a level change 1-2 at the body. Lot of straight body punches from Hernandez in this fight. And I think
I thought he looks pretty decent. As you said, and it was a matchup where like everyone else, it was. Well, I think all the other analyst people, I don't think the odds were actually that wide, but I think they should have been quite wide.
All the nerds we know were yeah, we know Hernandez, we get it.
Yeah,
he's gonna lose.
Yeah, I felt like it was one of those ones where the odds should have been wider because he had to look much better in order to even make it close.
Right. Yeah, and he looked, honestly, like within spitting distance of winning the fight, I thought. I think part of the difficulty is that Bill Algeo is just a really tricky striker. He is really, really sort of organic and creative. He is particularly good at firing punches from weird angles off of unpredictable movement and at disguising the punches that come off those weird angles. The most notable shot of the fight that he knocked Hernandez down with in round 2 was this sort of sweeping left hand after having fired a lot of pot-shotty, like dart left hands that were perfectly straight. And then this long sweeping shot just completely caught Hernandez by surprise, hit him right on the side of the jaw. But really, I think at the end of the day, the deciding factor in this fight, more than anything, was Algeo's chin. Because Hernandez, especially in round 3, he hit him with some life changers. He was hitting him with big... Hernandez is a puncher. I mean, he, again, clearly a great athlete, fast, heavy-handed. He was nailing Algeo with clean shots, and they just had zero effect. I mean... It's not fair, but that's how it goes sometimes. That really, I think, is the thing that prevented him from being able to come back and win this. Because I thought based on his third round showing after that, and he was looking pretty good in the second round, I kind of thought he was winning it up to the point when he got knocked down because he came back to his corner.
Basically every round, you could argue, Hernandez was...
Except the first, I think.
More... Even the first.
He was fine.
You could argue that he was doing more consistent work. It just comes down to the fact that he got knocked down by a back kick to the body at one point, and then had each round had a decisive moment when you'd suddenly be like, oh, Algeo's winning.
Yeah, I thought in the first he I mean, it shows the increased sort of presence and calm that he exhibited, that he went back to his corner and he said, I'm getting outpointed. And they're like, yep, we need you to up the intensity. We need more volume, and we want more change-ups. I think they asked for some wrestling change-ups. Those didn't really materialize. But he definitely came out with more pressure and more volume to back it up. Most of it still to the body, which I loved, especially because Algeo is so tall. Every single fighter out there should be hunting the body against anyone who's even 3 inches taller than them. It's just a much easier target to find, and it creates the opportunities to come in over the top with your headshots. And I thought he was winning round 2 with that increased volume and all those body punches, and then he got dropped. And I thought he won round 3. I don't think he did it on maybe any of the at least on one of the scorecards. I think Algeo got 130-27. It's not like it wasn't close, but it was really just the fact that Algeo showed absolutely zero effect from being nailed by Hernandez that made it seem as close as it was, because he was cracking him with big punches. And I think a big part of this was especially encouraging to me, is that Algeo had a much harder, most of this fight was Algeo on the back foot. And that can often be a bridge into the kind of pressure that breaks Hernandez, because a lot of the people who have beaten him, he wants to pressure them. He knows he doesn't like being pressured. And it usually starts with just bursts of pressure from the opponent. This is the classic case that lost him the Cerrone fight and has been repeated several times since, is that somebody will first counter him, and then they will build on that and back him off, and then everything starts to crumble. One moment of pressure will lead to a sort of sea change in the fight. And those moments were quite difficult for Algeo to find, because I thought Hernandez was really diligent in just making sure he was at the right distance to start with. He very rarely overcommitted or overstepped into range, leading everything behind his jab and his straight right as well, and paying really careful attention to when Algeo was trying to step into him and taking that. A lot of them were still straight backward steps, but that is a perfectly viable way of defending yourself as long as you take that step at the right time. and you stay out of range from the outset. You can back straight off all day, especially in the octagon with like no corners to speak of. You can back straight off all day if A, you're starting from a position of pressure, meaning you have a lot more open space at your back to work with, and B, you don't wait until the guy's already in range to start backpedaling. You take a short step back or two when he makes that first twitch, takes that first step towards you, and then you're just still out of range. What's he going to do? He has to run forward like an idiot to catch you. So yeah, I thought, again, just a really mature, controlled performance. I felt sad for Hernandez that he didn't win it, because and I hope he doesn't take it too hard, because it looks like he could repeat these same sort of results and win some good fights going forward.
It's yeah, I mean, I always get like sad when I see that kind of fight. You know, it's the classic. You know, even when it was Jose Aldo winning it, against Rob Font, I was still just like, I don't like it. I just feel sad for Rob Font, like, because he's doing all the right things. He is approaching this fight exactly as he should, and then he's just getting dinged on singular moments and losing it. But yeah, 100%. And yeah, it's genuinely encouraging to see like someone like Hernandez sort of confronting their demons, even if he can be, you know, he has been historically a bit of a dickhead. Like him being candid about that kind of, you know, about the anxiety that he puts on himself, rather than him just, you know, when he first came to the UFC, it was just like, I'm the best fighter in the world. Yeah.
Dropping the front, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is obviously that he needs some kind of back foot game. Yeah. That is the real missing piece at this point, because at the moment it was sort of surprisingly crafty offense all the time. Mm-hmm. The problem with that is that eventually, I mean, the problem with that is that it compelled him to keep pushing his lead. Yes. You know, he was ahead on the cards for round 2 for like, you know, 3 minutes in or whatever it was. And he basically had to keep coming in behind his shots the whole time. He'd be like faint left hand into the right, faint jab, and then long right to the body, all this kind of stuff. And it would be constantly him trying to make Quarantillo think what punch is coming next. Algio. And in all 3 of those rounds, at some point, Quarantillo just stuck something out.
Algio.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry, Algio. I always get those two mixed up. Yeah. Algio could just stick something out, whether it was the back kick in the first round or the big long hook in the second. And, you know, he could afford to be wrong because he's Bill Algio. Right. But if he was right, it was the singular turning point of the round for him. Yep. If Hernandez could counterpunch people when they came after him, so that he was, you know, when he was retreating out after his blitzes, he could actually, you know, discourage them from chasing him, or if he could just survive on the back foot because he could counterpunch people, and so he could sit on a lead. Yeah. Either of these would have made this fight extremely winnable for him, and it's basically it's just the complete lack of a back foot game. But his front foot game is very crafty at this point, I think. Yeah, it has really improved. I mean, he's been for some time an increasingly skilled counterpuncher in that aggressive context too. You know, he actually managed, especially in the third round, to thwart a lot of Algio's attempts to stop his pressure by just punishing him when he tried to fire. Yeah. Beautiful right hand to the body, left hook upstairs is one that I remember as a counter to Algio's jab. And but he doesn't have a back game. You're absolutely right. He's got a good jab, but he is still straight line retreats almost all the time. And that's an interesting thought. I mean, despite the fact that MMA fighters have such long rounds, I think it is quite a rare thing for any fighter to sort of recognize, to like evaluate the fact that they are winning the round and recognize that now they can put the question to the other guy. Be like, okay, now you do something to beat me, and have that as like a position of strength. You know, I'm on the back foot, I'm evading,
you have to chase me. You have to take some risks. This is a thing that boxers do all the time. And it's easier for boxers because shorter rounds, but more. And so in a 10 or 12 round fight, you can sometimes take an entire round and just see what the other guy has to offer, see how much he has left, and give yourself a moment to recover without the whole fight slipping away from you. But it's a lesson I think a lot of MMA fighters could employ for at least parts of these very long rounds they get, which is like, say round 2, Hernandez is, I think, winning. It's 3 minutes in.
Mm-hmm.
Now you just draw back and make Algeo make some mistakes. Take yourself out of a position where you have to be pressuring, you have to be building, because otherwise he's running you down. But which is counterintuitively a kind of strategy, which means you are constantly in range. You are also always at risk. So if he comes up with the right gamble, he might just steal the round from you in one moment, which is what he did.
Yeah, and he can fail on his gamble.
Yes.
3, 4, 5 consecutive times. It doesn't matter.
Because he can just eat whatever shit you're throwing at him. Yeah, it doesn't matter in the same way that it matters for you. So, all the same, I thought a very, very encouraging performance. And these are always my favorite. It's just somebody that you have. Like, I'll be gratified this weekend if we see Yusuf show up and look like slick and creative and relaxed. Anytime that you've essentially completely written a fighter off, and then it's like, oh, you know what? Like, they have actually been through a slow learning curve this entire time, and now they've made it to the other side.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it looked like for Hernandez. Good fight, too. Very fun.
Yeah, really good. Should be proud of himself.
All right. Well, on that very positive note, let's take one more break. When we come back, we have a couple other fights to talk about. We could perhaps touch on fights like Buckley Morono and Dober Glenn, one of which should be really short to discuss. And I also want to talk about Jonathan Martinez, Adrian Yanez, which is coming up on next weekend's undercard. We're going to hit all of that we can after this. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. Hello, welcome back. We are talking about some undercard fights now. I suppose we should start off with what looks like the most tantalizing matchup on the Barboza-Yusuf undercard, which is a bantamweight showdown between Jonathan Martinez and Adrian Yanez. Martinez just coming off of a somewhat frustrating but impressive win over Said Nurmagomedov. Martinez, who has always looked like a less promising prospect, I think, than Adrian Yanez. But then again, Yanez is coming into this fight off a loss, a first-round KO against a resurgent Rob Font. So I think that makes this a very interesting matchup. We have...
Wait, Martinez wasn't the one who fought Said Nurmagomedov. That was someone else, right?
No, he fought... Am I getting the wrong Nurmagomedov?
He didn't fight any Nurmagomedovs, did he?
Yeah, he fought Said.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was his last fight, and it was one where Said was
of course,
blazingly fast and hitting him with lots of kicks, and Martinez had to kind of persuade himself to keep the pressure on, and ended up finding the clinch as a solution, but was also struggled, I think, to be aggressive or assertive enough with his pressure, but still got it done, and really had to tough out because it was a fight where it was like Said could just hit him for free, basically, with kicks until he got into the right range to neutralize him. Just a physical mismatch, which Martinez was crafty enough to win. But a very, very close call, and one where I think, if I recall correctly, Nurmagomedov could have, and I suspected at the time would get the decision. So,
yeah, I think it was broadly considered to be a bit of a robbery. Now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, let's see. What does MMA Decisions say? MMA Decisions, Jonathan Martinez. Because I felt it was justifiable and fine, but it was just super close.
That's because you like Jonathan Martinez.
That's true. I'm
more
biased.
Than you like Said Nurmagomedov.
Yeah, certainly the media decisions are heavily weighted in favor of Said Nurmagomedov. All 29-28 cards. Actually, one person gave him. I won't call it his name because our savage fans will go and burn his house down. I've already said too much. I've given away that it's a man. One person gave Nurmagomedov a 30-27. Everyone else 29-28. Only 4 of the, I'm not going to count, but 20 odd people here gave it to Martinez. So definitely, even there, you can see a close fight, but one where it was like, okay, Said has just done the more impressive things. Anyway, that's not the fight we're breaking down here. We're talking about him versus Martinez versus Adrian Yanez, who had a much more decisive result in his last fight.
Yeah, I think this is definitely... I find this one tricky because, I mean, obviously from like the MMA math perspective, you could be like, well, Davey Grant knocked out Jonathan Martinez, and Jonathan Martinez, Adrian Yanez beat Davey Grant, not easily, but clearly.
He definitely beat him, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think anyone really beats Davey Grant easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the other hand, I find this one very tricky because there's two, like, very, a pronounced routes to victory for either guy. I am not 100% convinced is built to deal with much of a kicking game.
Yanez.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, I also feel like he can just drown Martinez with work rate.
Yeah, and I just feel that Yanez, I think, is pretty clearly a much more natural and faster and more dangerous boxer in the pocket.
Yep.
Martinez tends to be quite upright. A lot of his defense, which has improved, no doubt, in the last couple of years, but a lot of his defense is still based on either not being in range or throwing up the high guard or grabbing a clinch. A lot of his defense, another way to say that, are sort of workarounds to not actually have to directly confront a combination of punches coming at his face. And yeah, I mean, we talked about it at the time. I still find Yanez's loss to Rob Font to be very interesting because I think, looking back, the point that they're both at in their careers, I would still pick Yanez pretty confidently. And what happened was, I think Yanez bought both his own hype and Rob Font's lack thereof, and came to an incorrect conclusion that because he's so clearly a dangerous boxer, no question about that, and that Rob Font kept getting hurt by everyone, that he was basically just going to slug it out and throw down and wipe Rob Font off the map, and failed to realize that this is in fact not the way any of the people who have been repeatedly hurting Rob Font have beat him. And that in fact, if you decide to have a slugfest with Rob Font, you may find out very quickly that you are slugging it out with Rob Font, who is himself a considerable puncher and very, very dangerous and also bigger than you. And so it was, I think just a strategic error from Yanez that he was way too aggressive, way too content to just kind of hang out in the pocket. Probably if he had to do it again, I would still think he had a solid shot of winning by just being more patient and trying to draw Rob Font's fairly predictable offense out and find ways to counter his jab and punish him and build up to more intense combination work, not just get into a firefight. which again, Rob Font's just as dangerous as you in a genuine firefight. But yeah, the point about Yanez dealing with the dedicated kicking game is an interesting one. He has not really faced a ton of dedicated kickers. I would say Randy Costa, who is largely
mostly tuned him up with straight shots before gassing
jabs
out horribly, right?
Yeah, jabs. He did land. Costa has a karate background, I believe. He does have some very quick and tricky high kicks, but is not like an all-round kicker. Martinez is way more apt to just chop somebody down with low kicks. And then Davey Grant landed a fair few body kicks on Yanez, but nobody who's
he basically had Yanez like touching the mat with his hand after at least 2 low kicks in the first round.
Yeah,
he just didn't keep at it because he's Dave Grant. It's not what he does.
Yeah. He had a lot of other ideas, most of which were hooks.
Yeah, he's like, no, it's punching time. This guy's punching with me. You can't punch with me. I'm gonna punch you.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
Martinez... he was landing at clean, hard low kicks on Yanez a lot.
Yeah, and Martinez is a good kicker. And as long as you're competing with him at kicking range, he's very tricky. He's dexterous. He can kick well with both legs. And I think Martinez might be well served in a fight like this to sort of reverse the trend of his fight with Said Nurmagomedov. Instead of pressuring, closing down, getting into the clinch, he would be wise, I think, to view kicking range as his strength in this fight and maybe try to just keep Yanez at bay and slow cook him from long distance.
Yeah, I think his primary thing is, like, can he take away Yanez's jab by low kicking him with it?
Yeah. And it seems viable. Maybe
as
he can.
He's, not necessarily simultaneously, but, as, afterwards, or, just to discourage him putting weight on the front foot, the more he can defeat, because so much of Yanez's game is built off his jab.
Yep.
I do worry that, I say worry because I think I probably enjoy Yanez's game more. I think he, in many ways, has a higher, or at least, let's say, more technically interesting ceiling than Martinez. I think
a higher physical ceiling as well. Yanez is just he's super quick. He's powerful. I think he looks like a better athlete than Martinez.
Mm-hmm. I think he's probably less. I think he's probably less physically strong.
Maybe.
That was one of the things I sort of took away from the Nurmagomedov fight, is that simply locking up with Martinez for a long time, just apart from also getting low kicked a bunch, but clinching up with Martinez just really gassed Nurmagomedov out.
Yeah, well,
I think it's
also
very strong. He was technically. It was worse in the grappling, but
yeah,
I got the impression he is a sturdy dude.
Yeah, I agree, but I also think that Said is, he is one of those fighters who's, unlike Grant Dawson, whose style I genuinely find I just don't like. Even though it's not like the true bane of my existence that grappling is, it's almost like it's the sort of the Nietzschean horror of recognition thing, right? It's so close to a style I should enjoy that I'm like, you're doing everything wrong. I hate this. It's like how, Russian Orthodoxes probably hate Greek Orthodoxes, or how any Christian sect hates another Christian sect. Same shit, slightly different. How dare you? I think a big part of that too was just that Said is incredibly inefficient. That he cannot distinguish between the strategic value of a jab and a tornado kick. And in all the grappling sequences was going just hell bent for leather, 60 miles an hour, just slamming his fucking foot to the floor and scrambling as hard as he could. But yes, Martinez certainly looked strong enough in the clinch to neutralize him and continue wearing on him. And maybe that is a difference between them. But Yanez is definitely faster and harder hitting. and is also just a much slicker fighter. I know he didn't look it in the Rob Font fight, but he's generally a very cool customer in mutual range and has some great slips, solid defense, and can really stay calm even under a barrage and come up with some really clever, accurate counters. And also just a better range of setups with his hands. I mean, he's got a great jab, as you said, but he also feints well. He doubles and triples his jab. He changes levels, attacks every target. So, but I am concerned about the kicking game of Martinez, and possibly the clinch too. I mean, if Yanez therefore has to push harder to get past, to use pressure to take the kicking game away, yeah, maybe he gets tied up, and maybe Martinez can make something happen there. Martinez is very effective in the clinch, and not a bad takedown artist when he has a mind to be.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big part. That was also a big part of the Font fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just that he tried to brawl with him. It was that Font, they kept being in situations where Font could get one giant mitt on Yanez and then clobber him with the other.
Yep,
like,
just hold him in range.
It was hockey punching him.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's reason to be concerned about Yanez in that kind of fight. I think I'm concerned about Martinez's ability to work the low kicks. I do feel like he's a fighter that doesn't like certain level of activity, and that's in part why the Nurmagomedov fight was so miserable.
Yes.
He was just like, the fight has reached a certain level, and therefore I am going to, I have to cool it down for a while until it's back at what I consider to be like Martinez pace.
Mm-hmm.
And whilst that was like a real, like, Yanez killed himself with his attempt to enforce a very high pace against Font. That isn't necessarily going to happen all the time. And like going back to fights like, I mean, even Andre Ewell, who you don't necessarily really think of as like as an insistently violent fighter.
Mm-hmm.
There were points at which, like, Martinez just started shelling up.
Mm-hmm.
And, admittedly, he's obviously a much better fighter now. He was very young then, experienced and so on. But, as we've said many times, fighters don't change that much. I do think that, like, even though there's going to be, like, lots of dicey moments for Yanez early, again, he's going to get his leg kicked out, I think, almost immediately.
Yeah.
I just feel like Martinez is he's one of those guys where he just wants a slow pace too badly. And I just don't think Yanez will give it to him. I
mean, counterintuitively, I feel like this is a fight where, like, Yanez could try to do what he did to Rob Font.
Mm-hmm.
And it would probably work.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if he does that, I think it stands a really solid chance of just drowning Martinez.
Yeah, just a dumb approach. Just relying on being way smoother and higher output and harder to deal with in pocket range. The thing
it's also just it's just a strategic approach for dealing with kickers as well. You just
exactly
stay on them and punch them to death.
Yeah, and the trouble for Martinez against Nurmagomedov was not being able to come up with what felt to him like a safe way of leading from range. Like, once he had kind of slowed Nurmagomedov down and even had him backing up against the fence, then like actively making the clinch happen, which is where he was winning, was like kind of difficult for him. He just needed to enter with a jab and just use that to step through, throw two punches and close the distance. And he got a little gun shy because he was wary of the speed of what might be coming back at him, which was still there even when Saeed was gassed. He was still just much faster. And he just ended up looking really, really gun shy. And then also, when he got to the clinch, finally, I think he ended the fight like doing basically nothing. Holding the position, because it was like a moment of mental respite, a moment to breathe and be like, okay, thank God that chaos is over. I think you're right. And that's why I'm favoring Giannis. I just don't think Martinez is comfortable in a slugfest. I mean, it's why he lost to Davy Grant. He was knocked out in that fight. Yeah, the question here is maybe like, how does Giannis' approach change, having now been knocked out, I believe, for the first time?
Mm-hmm. I think he was undefeated for that, right?
Pretty sure, yeah. So does he come in? No, he was not. He was undefeated in the UFC. He lost a good bit earlier in his career. Lost a split decision to Miles Johns in 2018. Domingo Pilarte, another split decision in 2017. Some guy named Levi Moles in 2014. He had not lost since 2019, though. And I suspect those were probably very wrestling-heavy performances, based on what I know about both of those.
I mean,
guys.
Also, he was just young.
Yeah.
It's fine. You can, it's a hard sport to figure out.
Yep. And knowing the sort of Jorge Masvidal-ness, maybe they were fights where Giannis wasn't being beaten that badly. We're guessing here. We could watch the footage right after this and be like, oh shit, he got destroyed. But I suspect probably just wasn't being beaten that badly, but also just wasn't doing enough to win.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I think, Andre Ewell did it, as you said. There were times where he just started teeing off. And Martinez was super uncomfortable. He tried to fire back, but then he ultimately defaulted to just kind of shelling up because he did not like having to trade with somebody. He didn't enjoy having to trade with Davy Grant. He didn't enjoy the prospect of trading with Said Nurmagomedov. All of these guys, I think, a little faster and just more down to brawl. And provided that Giannis is still down to brawl, then I suspect he can beat Martinez in a firefight.
Yep, because he's better than all of those guys in that particular area.
Yeah, I would say so. Very curious to see what he looks like, though, after that loss. Would love to see it be like a newly mature performance in which he can still leverage these advantages, but we shall see. If he comes in questioning himself, Martinez has just proved to himself that he belongs with the best of the best. Maybe this is a surprising moment where, like Gamrot moving beyond Sarukian, maybe,
yep.
But hopefully not so infuriating as an actual decision. Okay, anything else to say before we close out about last week's card? We had Buckley Morono, we had Dober Glenn. Anything to really point out about those?
I mean, they were mostly, weirdly enough, they kind of just went like we thought they would.
Well, I think I might have picked. Did I pick Morono? I can't remember.
You are a sucker.
I can't remember. Did I? If I did, I probably.
I can't remember. I don't think you did. I thought we both picked Buckley.
You're like,
just say that we did. Let's just say that this was just a card where we were both just right all the time.
That's right.
I definitely picked Joaquin Buckley. I was like,
I'm pretty sure you did. I think I may have knowingly made a bad pick for Morono as a sort of like.
I thought you were like, I've already made one stupid pick. That's going to be it.
That could be it. I could have either
one
tried
genius
to
right pick with Bobby Green. Now I've used my stupid pick card.
Yeah, thinking back, I either made like a bargain with the gods, where I was like, if I give you Alex Morono, you'll let Bobby Green win, or I was like, I'm making stupid, optimistic picks. I'm going to make another one.
Yeah.
Can't recall.
Yeah, like good performance from Joaquin Buckley.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously, it's his margins for error are much smaller than Alex Morono. You could see.
Yep.
It's not just the speed and the coordination or the power. It's just that, like, being in there with all of those things was just gassing Alex Morono the fuck out towards the end of that fight.
Yep.
It was a little sad to watch.
Yeah, it just looked like a superior athlete beating up a normal guy for the most part. And Drew Dober, Drew Dober on Ricky Glenn. I thought Dober talked about commentary was talking about his reflections on the loss to Frivola. I wouldn't say this was a radically different performance from Drew Dober, but one thing I'll say, he did kick the hell out of Ricky Glenn's legs, which was an interesting wrinkle we have seen precious little of from Drew Dober in his last several fights. And
that's a good point. I can't remember.
Yeah.
The last time Drew Dober went to his kicking game significantly. It's like a couple of Drew Dober transformations ago.
Yeah, right. He used to be a pretty active kicker when he was a much more sort of light-fisted, mobile kickboxer. It seems to pair very well with his current, more aggressive, pressuring, power-punching approach. Why not mix in just a thudding, be like Justin Gaethje, just throw in a thudding low kick. He was doubling up on it at a few points. So it didn't look all that different, but he did one thing I don't recall him doing very often, and otherwise, this one we can certainly crow about it being a completely predictable. Can we even crow? Because it was once we started talking about it, it seemed like such an obvious pick. But hey, we've thought that before and got it wrong, so let's take our plaudits where we can get them. Okay. Well, I think
each other. Yes,
that's right. I think that's got to be it.
No one else.
This week's episode. Yeah, everyone else got it wrong, we assume. We will wrap it up for today's episode. Check us out on the Twitter at Evil Greg Jackson, at Boxing Bush. I'm going to try to start posting more on Blue Sky as well, because Twitter just sucks now. It's just increasingly unfun to be on there. So if you want to interact with me over on Blue Sky, do that. I guess I don't want people haranguing me for invites, but you do get a few when you create an account. So maybe I will post those on Twitter if you do not already have an account over there, and you will find me at King Typo. Their handles are kind of awkward. I think it's at kingtypo.bluesky.social or something. But if you search King Typo, you'll find me. And otherwise, yeah, that's it. We will be back next week. What's our upcoming card again? Yusuf.
It is Makhachev Oliveira 2.
That's right, of course. For which I will also have an article coming out on Bloody Elbow talking about Charles Oliveira. So extra analysis from me in a couple weeks' time. And also, I guess I'll mention, since he just reached out to me, that when Ngannou Fury rolls around, Kyle McLaughlin is going to be back on the show to talk with us about that, at least after the fight, I believe. So,
sweet.
I was thinking, after we've been through McGregor, Mayweather, and I was just thinking of the giant in Twin Peaks saying, "It is happening again." It's the feeling I get about having to break down a fight like Ngannou Fury. That gum shield you like is going to come back in style. So we have that to look.
It could be worse.
It could be.
At least it'll never be as bad as McGregor Mayweather.
No, it can never be, right? But there will be some stupid takes, and we will try to deliver some of the less stupid ones when that rolls around. Anyway, all of that's in the future. For now, we're done. If you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.
How funny will it be if Magomed Ankalaev loses to Johnny Walker?
Oh my god. He should. He deserves it.
It would be so funny. I want to see how mad Ramzan Kadyrov gets.
Isn't he in a coma, or did he recover?
Is he?